So, thank you everyone for being here today. Welcome to the HMPPS Insights event. Today is a session which is around creating recovery-focused cultures, insights about incentivized substance-free living units in prison. So we're really excited to be here today to talk to you about ISFLs. And when we saw the Insights events were available for us to apply for, we were really keen to be able to showcase the work that's going on from a national perspective, from a research perspective, from a lived experience perspective, and from a drug strategy lead working in a prison perspective. So we hope that today you are going to take some insights away about ISFLs from, you know, not just an academic state, not just a strategic, but also, you know, practical ways of driving this forward, and also hearing the perspective of lived experience and how crucial this initiative is really in prisons. So I'm really pleased to be co-hosting today with Larry, Mark and Tracy. So my name's Katie Lawley. I am the National Drug and Alcohol Lead working within the Drug and Alcohol Group within HMPPS. I've been doing this role for around 2.5 years now, and before that I was the Regional Drug Strat Lead, and I have been a Drug Strat Lead in a prison as well. So I've had the beauty of being part of the opening an ISFL right in the beginning of when there was no funding and stuff like that, and now to sort of be part of leading this nationally is something that I have been really proud of, and I'm really proud of every single one of you who is on the call today, who's overseeing these units or even just wants to understand a little bit more about it. So thank you for being here. We couldn't do our jobs and we couldn't create these spaces without you guys, so yeah, really appreciative of you being here today. We have got Mark as well. So Mark is Professor Mark Monaghan. He's a professor in criminology at the University of Loughborough, and we have had the absolute pleasure of being able to do some work with Mark, who is an absolutely he's an amazing researcher and also a really fantastic person, and we've had the pleasure of working alongside him on some of the work we've been doing with ISFLs in the last year. We've also got Larry Eve, an absolute pleasure to welcome Larry. So Larry comes as a person with lived experience, but also just again an amazing person. We've had the beauty of working with him for like the last 2 years, and our work with him has increased, so you will get lots of insights around that. And Larry works for an organisation called the Basement Project, and I'm sure he will mention that when he introduces himself later. And then we've got Tracy, who is the drug strat lead at HMP Deerbolt, was the drug strat lead at Durham, has got lots of experience in this space of setting up ISFLs, and is doing an amazing job at Deerbolt. So we're really excited to for everyone to kind of show their perspective. I am just going to unspotlight you guys now, because everyone would have seen you, and you will come on your individual bits if that's okay. So I will do that now. Oh, Ali, I can see your screen. I think you're accidentally sharing something. Right, that didn't quite go to plan. Let's try again. Okay. Right, let me unspotlight. Oh no, I'll keep myself there. Right, hopefully everyone can see the slides again. If I could just ask everyone to stay on mute if you are not speaking. We will take questions, as I said, at the end. So it would be great if you could mute yourselves and also keep your questions to the end, or please use the chat function, the Q&A function, to ask questions as we go along, so that at the end we can answer your questions if we haven't done so already. I will also ask you not to share your screens as well, because then it will kind of like disrupt the presentation. So thank you for that. So as I have said, I've introduced us all and where we're at. So on to the next one. So ISFLs have come a very long way. We're now up to 85 individual prisons with ISFLs. So we've come a long way. This really, it stemmed from voluntary drug testing units, but it also stemmed from the 10 Prison Project. And since then, in 2018, it has had a mass expansion. So the idea of an ambition really of an incentivized substance free living unit is to create that recovery orientated environment where we support people through their recovery, whether they're in the early stages of recovery or moving through to the later stages of recovery. We are creating spaces in prisons which help and enable people on that journey. So the idea is it should be an ethos focused on prioritising safety, rehabilitation and support. That is what the main ethos of these units are. Now, the makeup of the units differ from site to site, and we have got a range of different spaces. So some have got dedicated smaller units which are standalone, they're on their own, and some have got landings, and some have got whole prison approaches. So it really does differ across the estate, but the ethos remains the same, and that is where we are there to support and create a space where there's hope, and I'm sure that Larry will touch on that later around hope. We also use the concept of CHIME framework, which you can see there, and I think that Mark and Larry may be speaking about this a little bit later as well. But this is really the ethos of the ISFL, is around getting people connected with one another, giving them hope and purpose, giving them an identity. So removing that stigma, allowing people to be their true selves again and find themselves through this journey. Give them meaning for inside and outside prison, and also start to empower people so that they can make their own decisions and start to support their own future and what that really looks like. So a key part of it is really about building a community. So the community ethos is not just there for prisoners, it is also there for staff. And so we really want to kind of focus on that as well today, around how crucial ISFLs can be for the prison culture, not just for prisoners and those living on the units. It's really about what that can do much wider than that. Larry will be probably talking around the social contagion of hope a little bit later, but a lot of it is around hope being contagious, and that's almost what we're creating on these units, is the opportunity that hope is, that you can see hope, you can feel it, and you can see what that looks like. And really, it's about strength in numbers and, reducing stigma, reducing feeling of isolation, building trust. It's the belief that there is another option other than drugs and alcohol. So seeing role models such as lived experience and peer support reinforces this. And it proves that recovery is possible. And we really, truly believe that. And you, hopefully by the end of the session today, you would have had a better understanding around it. So today's session, we really are wanting you to get a better understanding of ISFLs, what their impact is on staff and prisoners. We're going to hear about lessons from Deerbolt and hear it and understand it from a lived experience perspective as well. So yeah, we hope that you can get as much from this session as possible. So, as I said earlier, we now have 85 prisons operating in across England and Wales. So, as I said, it originated from the voluntary drug testing and spread out around 10 prisons projects. And we now have them in every single category of prison. So, from long-term high security to Cat B locals, Cat Cs, female estate. We've got some in the young people estate, and we have also got them in Cat D sites. So they are everywhere. And what it's showing is that actually no one size fits all. You can create an environment where you can create an environment no matter what category of prison that is. So we quite often get questions around what was it? Sorry, I'm just looking at the comments. Yeah, we quite often get comments around Cat B locals. Can you really create an ISFL in a local prison when the churn is so high and people are kind of coming through very quickly? The answer is yes, because we see it. We see it wherever we go in Cat B locals. It's about planting those seeds and starting that journey as early as possible. And what I've said multiple times in different forums is, if we always wait for someone else to start that work, we will always be waiting for someone else to start that work. So the beauty of this, I guess, is that we've got it right from the beginning. So even if you're not got people for longer than 4 weeks, that 4 weeks where that person sees someone who's with lived experience and has been started that journey could be that moment that they decide to make that decision, to change things. And Larry will speak about his own experiences as well of, I'm sure, around how long he'd been in and out of custody for, and at that at that point there's been a point where there was that change and that decision to move forward, and so that opportunity is available for everyone, and what we're doing is we're creating that opportunity. So it is the largest specialist unit rollout in the whole country. So you've got pipes, you've got TCs, you've got things like that. ISFLs is the largest specialist unit rollout in the whole country. So there's nothing, we've now got them across all of these sites. And what we're hoping to do in the future is to create a pathway really across custody, across different sites, so that someone can go from one journey onto another. I've just got a short video here, which is only a minute and a half, so hopefully you can hear it and let me know if you can't. But this will hopefully show you the makeup of what we've got going on, and there's a couple of quotes here, and hopefully this will show you that recovery is possible in prisons. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of an overview and an understanding as to where we're at in terms of that national picture. And our experience and the evidence shows that with the right environment and support, people can recover while in prison. And I really, really want to re-emphasize that recovery is possible in prisons. I do feel like we are moving, we're doing a big movement really across HMPPS. And I guess it was always felt that you can start recovery when you get outside, go to rehab, go, do all the group work outside, but it is possible in prisons. We've seen it. So let's take a look at why ISFLs matter. So these are just some, we've got an evaluation ongoing, which will show you the evidence of why ISFLs work. But there has been some work around safety and stability. So this shows really that ISFLs create a safer, calmer prison environment. So we're talking about reduced violence, reduced self-harm, but we're also talking about recovery-focused culture. And we're really excited for the publication of the evaluation. But the initial findings are that there is a 93.3% probability that prisoners on ISFLs engage in fewer assaults. That's absolutely huge. That is absolutely massive. That's not something to be, that's not by chance or fluky. And there's a 93% probability that prisoners on ISFL engage in fewer self-harm incidents. And Tracy will be talking about some of this stuff later in her presentation about actually what that looks like in the reality of Deerbolt. And so overall, there's an 88.83% probability that prisoners on ISFLs engage in fewer assaults, self-harm, and indiscipline in incidents. These are supporting and creating spaces that feel safer for people. So yeah, really proud of it. So like I said earlier, it isn't just about it's not just about the prisoners, it's about the staff who are working in an environment where it does feel safer and more stable to work in. This is about supporting a prison culture and a prison change. And this is really, really powerful. There is loads of evaluation and research out there which will show us and talk to us about, so why does this work? So we know why ISFLs matter from a prison perspective, but what is the research telling us around really underpinning why these work? And so that's why I've asked Professor Mark Monaghan to come and speak to us today around, the research behind it, and the theory behind what we're doing, so that it will give you guys a bit of a context around this space. So I am going to hand over to Mark, who will take us through the research and why this model works. So Mark, if you're happy, it'll be over to you.
Thank you very much, Katie. It's a real pleasure to be here. So as Katie said, my name's Mark Monaghan. During my day job is really to be head of department of criminology at Loughborough University, but the bit of work I enjoy the most is the bit that I get to work with colleagues in the Ministry of Justice. So I've been on a secondment into the MOJ and HMP PS for about the last 18 months, working with various different parts of the organisation, but more latterly on the ISFLs and the 15-step intervention. And I'm going to talk a bit about today with Katie and all the legends in her team, past and present, with Larry, another legend. I'm often the support act for Larry, and I'm very happy to be that person as well, and doing that again today, and more latterly with Tracy and finding out all about the work that's going on at HMP Deerbolt. Kate, if I give you the thumbs up when to move on, is that okay? Great. Just got a few slides to show at the outset of this talk. I've probably got too many slides for the time allotted, so I'm going to work quickly through the first few anyway. But this is just why it's important to start thinking about recovery inside custody, because when we look at what's happening outside of custody, that the total there's basically a drug-related crisis of drug-related deaths. And you can see from the graph that this is getting worse as well. So we're now at record levels of, over 5,500 people dying from drug-related mortality, every year. And it's a shame, because we can do something about it. We know what to do about it. We just yet to kind of fully action it. And some of that action starts within custody, and that's what I want to get across in the talk today. But also there's kind of significant regional variations to this as well. And these deaths aren't spread equally across demographics. So men aged between 40 and 49 stand a higher chance of suffering a drug-related mortality. Deaths are higher in Scotland and the northeast of England, which is why what's going on in Deerbolt is particularly significant. And death rates tend to be clustered in the most deprived areas. So they're 9 times higher in deprived areas than the more prosperous areas. So just to give a sort of scale of the nature of the problem, we move that one on as well. And again, I won't dwell on all this, but drug use within prison is still actually in the minority. So of the data, that people self-report that 45% of prisoners use drugs in prison and 55 don't. There's quite a significant treatment population inside prison, so nearly 50,000 people in some form of structured treatment inside the prison system at the moment. And the graph on the bottom right of your screen shows the breakdown of that as well, in terms of people present for, and opiates are the highest, followed by alcohol. So the scale of the problem is there to see, and the challenge now is, well, what can we do about that? So we've seen that there are alongside rising drug mortality across the country, there's rising drug misuse within prisons. So it's increased significantly certainly between 2012 and 2018, when we've got the data. It's risen by 50%. And one of the challenges of this is the emergence of new psychoactive substances inside prisons, particularly the synthetic cannabinoids. So SCRAs, synthetic cannabinoid receptor agonists. Short is the long-winded name for what's more commonly known as spice. Supposed to mimic the effects of cannabis, but is actually much more potent, much more dangerous. And then even more recently, we see emerging inside prisons synthetic opioids, such as nitazines, which have been linked to a number of deaths across the prison estate. So there are changes as well, and particularly the synthetic opioids present a significant problem because they're such low dose, high harm substances. So only tiny amounts of these substances are required for a real serious adverse effect, which brings its challenges into the prison in terms of difficulties in kind of intervening through the conveyance system. Remember, really low doses, quite hard to trace. Links to organised crime networks as well, due to the lucrative markets inside the prisons as well. So the challenge is not insignificant that's facing prisons at the moment in terms of drugs. So just very quickly, what are the factors that shape why there's that 45% of people that use drugs inside prisons? Broadly can be distilled down into two main factors: non-modifiable ones, things that happen to people before they enter the prison estate, such as pre-prison drug use, past criminal history, and past experience of incarceration. None of that can be changed. With my academic hat on, we might say that this could be mitigated if we arrested fewer drug users or people who use drugs in the first instance and channeled them out the criminal justice system earlier. Because we don't do that, we need things like ISFLs, and we need things like drug recovery wings to kind of offset some of the harder end of that as well. The modifiable factors, and this is things I do want to talk about today, are things that we can change, things that can be changed to make a difference in people who use drugs, their life inside custody. So the prison conditions, support around mental health, different regimes with more meaningful and purposeful activity, are all things that can be changed and can be developed. And the purpose of the ISFL, as Katie said at the start, is to start thinking about how we might do that as well, and how we might bring about a different culture shift that becomes much more recovery focused. Thanks, Katie. My final sort of background slide: drug and alcohol treatment in secure settings. I showed the graph already. Nearly 50,000 people receiving structural treatment, which often involves kind of integrated and specialist care around medical and psychosocial interventions. It could be opioid agonist therapy. Some of it may involve harm reduction and crisis support. And it's often delivered by highly qualified staff in coordination with other services around the prison. But often that's kind of what's missing in these as well, Katie. You just moved that on, is that there's has been in the past, and this was noted in the Black Report, and it's not just in prison, it's in the community as well, a kind of absence of joined up delivery between substance misuse services and structured treatment, and then the recovery community as well. And what we're hearing about more and more is the move towards developing what are called recovery-oriented systems of care that cover the whole journey of somebody who experiences substance misuse difficulties or whatever, opioid use disorders in certain circumstances, to be given access to various parts of this system that becomes more integrated as well, whether that's an initial sort of harm reduction approach at the outset to sort of save a life at times of crisis, through to structured treatment, through to engaging with peer-based recovery networks of support. Organizations like Larry's network, Larry's organization that he may talk to us about, the Basement Recovery Project up in Halifax. So the aim of recovery services in prison then is to provide this network of peer-based recovery support, establish communities of recovery, which might take the form of mutual aid groups, self-help groups, which could be 12-step fellowships or versions of smart recovery. And the ISFL is part of this broader network of activity. And one of the things that I want to talk about over the next slides is the nature of the ISFL, just drawing on what Katie said, but also interventions that we've been working on that Larry's pioneered in terms of enhancing what ISFLs do through this 15-step program we've been working on over the past few months. Just move that forward, Katie. So as Katie showed earlier, incentivized substance free living wings, ISFLs, dedicated units to help support prisoners or residents of prisons to live substance-free lives through various different incentives, different support features, but importantly to try and experience a different kind of culture, a kind of culture that is based on principles of support, of welfareism, that stands in contrast maybe to other things that have experienced inside custody, where there's been much more emphasis on punitive measures and a much more security focus. Now, I won't talk through all the core features because you can see them on the slide, but on the slide here. But things like having having regular sort of drug testing on a kind of voluntary basis, in a sense, to kind of that's used supportively, but for a different kind of reason, almost as a check-in to see how people's progress is going. To develop supportive environments through changes in culture, through integrated support. And I think another key element of this, of the ISFLs, is that this is done in kind of, we just move that on, Katie, in sort of partnership, really. And partnership to kind of create an environment that is characterized by contagious recovery. So we know that addiction is contagious and spreads from people to people in communities and diffuses through communities. And the idea of the ISFL is to build a contagious recovery community where people can respond to one another and sharing their successes, and everybody buys into this. There's a few little animations that come up on this, Katie. Can you just keep sort of clicking through them? So the first one is to build a supportive environment. And I should say, so the ISFL is basically premised on this notion of the CHIME model of recovery that Katie introduced. The work that we've been doing on this 15 steps program that Larry has pioneered is to almost check the recovery temperature in a selection of prisons that we've been into, and to try and give a sort of blueprint for how these spaces can be enhanced and developed. So there's loads of good practice going on. 15 steps is almost a kind of shot in the arm to this as well. And what it tries to do is enhance the supportive environment that the ISFL is trying to develop through the creation of more therapeutic spaces. So it's important that the environment looks different on an ISFL, that it stands out from the rest of the prison, that it uses different kinds of furnishings and colour schemes, that it's much less sort of punitive and austere and much more welcoming and inclusive. And in doing so, it can kind of reduce a significant amount of tension. And you've seen the data for that from what Katie has shown us. And it's about creating allies, so staff and prisoners working in partnership with one another to enhance and protect these spaces. And so community is really central to this. The notion of developing a community is central to this, because it's a way of learning from one another and sharing practice and sharing in people's success. But there's also a kind of soft kind of policing that goes on. Policing might be too strong a word, but a sort of soft monitoring. So you're creating these spaces where any sort of perceived threat to this through rising antisocial behaviour, through substance misuse or through violence, isn't tolerated by the people who are in that space. So the community becomes the method. And in that way, you start to shift these cultural norms so that culture is protected, and this normalization of recovery becomes the ethos in which this space operates. Now, that can happen. It's vital to kind of keep those cultures protected through securing funding for these wings, but also informally through, the consolidation of drug-free attitudes in these spaces as well. We just move that one on, Katie. So as you say, that the ISFL and likewise the 15 steps intervention, where we, almost, you can consider it as a kind of audit, but again, that's too strong a word, is to kind of show how CHIME is central to this. So developing an ecosystem of where people feel connected to one another, where they have hope, where they develop a new identity towards somebody in recovery, maybe rather than as a drug user, where they have new meaning to their life and feel empowered as well. As I said, environmental enrichment is central to this, and there's lots of evidence around how, enhancing somebody's surroundings with supportive and engaging experiences and things that promote well-being can kind of pay off, and ISFLs try and do that through this more sort of warm color schemes and positive messaging on display around the wings. And the idea is that they develop on therapeutic communities that were commonplace, a while ago, maybe 15, 20 years ago. The ISFL is not necessarily a new endeavor, but it's kind of a building and developing that evidence base. So this kind of holistic approach to rehabilitation that's person-centered, that focuses on long-term behavioral change rather than just perhaps symptom management that you might get through some forms of structured treatment. As I said, that the community is the method here, that the sense of togetherness that everybody buys in, and it's partnership working. Just move that one on again, Katie, please. So we've been into 11 prisons on the first round of the 15-step intervention, and Larry does a walk around, and he might say more about this as well, so I don't want to steal his thunder, but he walks onto the first 15 steps of the ISFL and compares that with a general population wing. And this is combined with a trauma-informed presentation that Larry delivers to the leadership teams in prisons, so SLTs, and also to ISFL staff and drug strategy leads and SMS services if appropriate. And from this, a bespoke report is produced which sort of tests the recovery temperature of the places that we visit. And the idea is that we provide then a bespoke report which provides a blueprint or an action plan for the wings for the ISFLs and the drug strategy leads to kind of develop the ISFL. And so what we've been doing then is testing how well this has worked over the past few months. So Larry, when he does the sessions in the prisons, delivers a short questionnaire. And here's some of the data. Some of the questions are really revealing and give us some good data about how these recovery temperatures have been tested and the kinds of action points that have been suggested have landed. But the key thing here is it's about developing this sense of the importance of lived experience. So we need to hear less really from people like me and more from people like Larry in these spaces, because Larry can talk the talk and walk the walk and has experienced all these things and can show the power of lived experience. And lived experience has to be a core component of this community as method that we talked about before. And so some of the data that we got from delivering these sessions, to say I can't take any of the credit here, from Larry delivering these sessions is more appropriate. But the increased awareness of the power and innovation that lived experience can bring, the sense that people feel more informed about what recovery is when they work alongside people with lived experience, and the awareness that the session has helped people address drugs in prisons through a different lens, or a lens of recovery rather than treatment as usual, or rather than trying to punish our way out of it. And these are what the ISFLs try and do, and this is what the 15 Steps program is trying to enhance. And what we see from the data, from the small scale study that we've done so far, is that seems to be really resonating. So the more lived experience you can get into your ISFLs through peer support networks, through mutual aid, so on and so forth, more chance you stand of developing these recovery cultures. Katie, can we move that one on? And then we asked some open-ended questions on the survey towards the end about what was most powerful, what worked, what landed in terms of hearing from people with lived experience, and just the value of this and the peer support the role of peer support and engagement in recovery really came through, as did Larry's passion and engaging delivery, which you'll see in a second. But it also helps shift perceptions about what addiction is, about what recovery is, and the underpinning role of trauma in all this. And quite often when somebody relapses in an ISFL or outside an ISFL, it's not because of their kind of moral failing or a weakness of character. It's often because of a trigger that is outside of someone's control. And it's just kind of recognizing that through the adjudication processes as well. Can we move that one on as well, Katie? But so since Larry visited the prisons around sort of February, March time of 2025, I've done some follow-up interviews with with all the prisons actually involved in our initial sample, just to kind of see what's going on since then. And this is the last thing I'll probably say, Kate, because I'm running out of time. But we recognise that there is a significant challenge to realising a culture shift in prisons, so they become more recovery focused. And the data on all these slides are from the category C prisons that we visited, where in theory it should be more amenable to developing recovery oriented spaces, because in theory you have more settled populations on ISFLs for longer. But there are still challenges to this, and there are still things that need working on. The staffing issues around the relationships between substance misuse teams and ISFL staff, for instance, and the different sort of philosophies that they might have. There are kind of real bureaucratic barriers to getting mutual aid in through delays to the vetting, delays through vetting systems, the population turnover, so external pressures that arose from the early release scheme from last year, for instance. And as I mentioned, sort of competing philosophies across the prison, where some people are much more security and punitive focused, and some are much more sort of welfarist and rehabilitation focused. These are all there in the mix, but we're kind of aware of them as well. And being aware of them is useful because it helps us kind of work through them. But ultimately, the overarching data from this, we just move that on again, Katie, was really positive, and a real sense of how the ISFL can fit into this kind of recovery-oriented system of care, so that we can start to kind of think of ISFLs, if you just move that on again, Katie, just for timing purposes, the ISFLs ultimately should be able to provide dignity to people, the fundamental right that somebody should have a dignified standard of living, whether they're in custody or not. There's lots of evidence around how when you kind of engage people in an anti-stigmatizing way through respectful practice, you can really yield the results through sort of reduced antisocial behavior. That strong and trusting relationships are really coming out of the data as well, even in the Cat B locals, where there's a higher churn of kind of residents on the ISFLs. In some ways it doesn't matter, because often the same people come back and you're not starting from scratch. You've already got these pre-existing and trusting relationships that are there, that are based on compassionate service delivery. All that happens inside the prisons, but there's also kind of a structural level and a policy level that needs to happen as well. But that's beyond probably the scope of what we can talk about today. But ultimately, the ISFL and the 15-step intervention, where we're trying to enhance the practice of the ISFLs, is about creating these conditions and this culture for at least people to restore an element of dignity to their lives. And that's the promise of it, and that's what we're hoping to achieve as well. So I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Mark. As always, so grateful to have a professor on board who just, you give us you're the academic, aren't you? You're the knowledge of what we're doing. We believe in it, but you tell us why it works. So really grateful for all of your help. So thank you, Mark. And perfectly going to hand over to Larry as well, who's he needs no introductions, because you will realise very quickly who Larry is. And the floor is over to you now. Grateful for you.
Thank you, Katie, as always. Got to set the record straight. In your email you sent around to everyone with the link, Katie, you described me as an expert, and then Mark's calling me a pioneer, and I don't know about that. I don't know. what I am and what I can share with everyone out. I'm a drug addict that made it out alive. I'm so grateful to be in this space around people that I know are listening and people that are taking on board some of this stuff, and I've seen it in action. So I don't know about all that, but I'm just such a grateful addict that's really, really happy to be where I am today. Really don't have enough time to talk about my drug use or where it took me, but I was a drug user of the extremely complex kind. Complex needs was me, and I think I was probably an offender of the prolific kind, and I've been called both of those things probably from the age of about 10 right up to the age of 39, when I finally and very gratefully found recovery. And that's obviously took me to a million dark places, and most of those dark places were in different prisons across the country as well. Next slide, please, Kate. Brilliant. So I thought I'd give a little bit more context to what Mark was talking about the 15 steps pilot that we did with the drug and alcohol group. The first pilot, we did 11 prisons, and it involved the following. We did an SLT presentation. We did a 15-step walk onto a Gen Pop environment, the same walk onto an ISFL environment. And as Mark was alluding to, trying to compare the environments. What's the differences between them? Does it look different on here? Does it feel different? Am I reacting different? Is it a different environment? We had an audience with DART staff, so SMS staff. We had a private audience with them. I had a private audience with operational ISFL staff as well. And it was really probably the most interesting part of the work there was that I was able to ask all those shitty, uncomfortable questions that no one wants to ask. But I developed a way of asking those really shitty, uncomfortable questions in a manner where people, they liked answering me. So it's really good, some of the data we got back and some of the feedback, and a lot of that was compiled back into the report. Probably the most joyful part was some of the conversations we were having with prisoners, and I were contrasting what staff were telling me about the ISFL, operational and DART and drug strategy leads, and I was contrasting that to what the prisoners. Is that being filtered down into the prisoners? Are the prisoners feeling that energy, that positivity, or indeed that negativity as well? And then I did a tailored report, and I always say, like, I'm not a report writer, and I still say it now. So it's probably the worst part of this pilot was doing these reports. And every time I sent a report off, Katie said, "Oh, you might want to put that in," and they got longer and longer. So I don't know if it's about a report. I'd like to call it a reflection. And all I did was reflect back through the lens of someone that struggled with substance misuse and also someone that's experienced trauma before as well. Next slide, please, Kate. So the SLT presentation overall, it was, again, you can imagine someone like me in front of the SLT and I'm not being adjudicated. That was quite a refreshing thing for me as well. It was quite a new experience. So the first few I do, I'm really quite nervous, but I got into the swing of things because I was presenting to a captive audience, and and every SLT presentation I did in varying amounts, there was plenty of buy-in, and nobody in that SLT, apart from some that perhaps some of the old guard, we might want to describe them as, there was no resistance to what I was saying. But what really resonated with me was that I just don't think that space understood the complexities of what is needed to really deliver this stuff as well. So I think all that buy-in was there, but it felt like the know-how had to actually make this work and to actually turn this ISFL into an ISFL that looks like this. It didn't feel that the expertise was in the room. And I've got to say it really early in my presentation, I strongly believe that that expertise is in this room today, and every one of you that are on this meeting today, I believe in my heart that it's you guys that have to drive this and sell this to SLTs, because I do believe there's yeah, no one was closed to the idea, but I think operationally and what that looks like on ground zero really has to come from you guys. And I've seen evidence of that really working, and evidence where some drug strategy leads have really struggled to get that across to their SLT. Something that really stood out on the SLT presentation and some feedback was we spoke about the window of tolerance, and a really quite short description of that was I was talking about, is my drug use a trauma response, or is it a substance misuse response? So do I need a substance misuse intervention, or do I need a trauma intervention? And I did part of my presentation, and we really looked at the similarities between substance misuse interventions and trauma interventions. And is my drug using on this wing, is my prolific UTI in, is it due to trauma, or is it due to, you know, my need to use drugs? And we probably came to the conclusion that up to 60% of drug use in prisons today, it's my strong belief, that is more closely related to a trauma response than it is to the need and a substance misuse issue. Next slide, please, Kate. So the 15-step velocity, you've kind of heard, I'm slurring a bit. I had root canal earlier, so some words I'm coming out and it's coming out this side of my mouth. So I do apologise if I slur a bit. But basically, first 15 steps, I walk into an environment. I'm walking into an environment where I am quite nervous. I've never been on this environment before. I'm new. In this environment, I need help. So all these environments are the same. I'm an individual, a human being, walking into an environment where I need help. I am at a low point. I am at mentally, physically, emotionally, quite at a low point. And that probably isn't. And that probably isn't more describable than someone that's first coming into the prison service, and especially if they're coming in for the first time. So what we're looking for and what I'm evaluating and taking the temperature are is what's the first things I see? How visually appealing or visually trauma provoking is it for me? What am I hearing? What am I seeing? What is the ambience on the wing? How are people talking to each other? Part of the challenge as well is a trauma-informed walkthrough of the whole wing. So I did that on a Gen Pop and I did that on an ISFL environment, and we made comparisons to the two. And basically, the end game is, am I experiencing visible contagious addiction? Is this addiction the predominant contagion on this wing, or is the predominant contagion on this wing recovery and care and kindness, you know, and help and support and all of those things? And most of those comparisons were made in the report. Next slide, please, Kate. I'll go into that a little bit more. Okay, so 15 steps onto a Gen Pop wing. My overview, my journey. The journey from bus to bed is imperative in most local estates, and indeed in some resettlements estates as well. How I am processed through that reception area, the first night process, the induction process, and how I land on Gen Pop dictates how I behave and how I respond on Gen Pop. And it's my view that the prison, if we're going to develop a whole approach to recovery, a whole prison approach, there's a lot of work to do there, because that process through reception and that continued deficit-based assessment process, and it is risk assessment. And I've seen, you know, if your bus comes in late, listen, you're going through that section like lightning, and it really is a bit of a sheep dip process. And what I've spoke to men in first night environments, that it's really quite traumatizing, and that trauma itself coming through that environment and going on to a space where drugs are available is a precursor for drug use. Something else I noticed on Gen Pop wings, the incredible size of medication queues now, and how medication queues have took over the whole opening process. So unlock in the morning, everybody's focus, including staff, is the medication queue and getting people on the medication, getting them through the medication queue and the whole thing. And I guess what I wanted to say in this meeting is the problem we have is that demand for drugs in prison can't be, there's no prescription for this. So the medication get queues longer and longer and longer, and that's all I've seen evidence of. But this isn't a clinical response. There is no prescription, there's no prescriber. We can't prescribe our way out of some of these problems that we're having. So we want to see medication queues smaller as opposed to getting bigger. I think tradable meds as well, something that really stood out for me. There's a culture of tradable meds as somehow not substance abuse. How you could be trading meds and using tradable meds, but you're not using drugs. And that really struck me as well, that staff had a perception of that tradable meds were somehow less and it wasn't such a big issue. And, you know, it wasn't causing too much problem. And even I spoke to prisoners that didn't feel like they were abusing substances because they were abusing someone else's tradable meds. That's something that really stood out for me about culture. And certainly in recovery spaces, all of those are, you know, they're all substance abuse. Something I see on every Gen Pop I wing, vape debt, OCGs, and the presence of OCGs and OCG workers are present on every single Gen Pop wing I went on. UTIs and code blues becoming more frequent, and they feel normalised. So I walked into a space, I'll give you an example. I walked into a Gen Pop space and I was talking about drug use on the wing, and I was speaking to staff and they're saying, actually, it's really not that bad. We don't have that many UTIs on this wing. It's really not that bad. And I take a 15-step walk through that wing and I can spot 6 men that are clearly under the influence, And it almost feels like it's underreported, starters for 10, because most of the reporting only goes on when people are, you know, code blue or bouncing off the walls or having to be, you know, and put into a cell, or healthcare are having to be called. But there's something about, if you're not completely having a seizure, then somehow it feels normalized on some of the Gen Pop spaces that I've been on as well. And that is reciprocated by the prisoners as well. So prisoners see each other under the influence and it becomes attractive in that space. Another link on Gen Pop wings as well that I notice is that the lack or the poor upkeep of recreational equipment, your table tennis, your pool table, and anything recreational, there was a direct link to that to raise UTIs, raise acts of violence, and raise debt on the wing. So, for example, you know, if you've got a nice pool table and the pool cues are rubbish, it has an impact on men. If you've got a table tennis table and they're sharing a bat that's 25 years old that should have been replaced 5 years ago, all of those things make a difference and contribute towards drug use and acts of violence on the wing. Something else that stood out for me as well on Gen Wing and generally across the prison estate as well. One prisoner I spoke to, he aptly described peer mentors and red bands as catalogue boys. And basically what he said is that they're all quite low risk. You know, security love them because, you know, they might be their first time in prison. They don't present a risk to anyone. You can give them a red band. They can free to walk across the prison. But what this guy said to me is the peer mentors in here, Larry, haven't walked in my shoes. They don't know what it's like to be me. I've never lived that life they're living. I can't communicate with them on a level. I don't identify with them. And there's a real consistency of that across the prison estate where we don't take chances on the guys that have walked through the fire, the guys that are probably more high risk, the guys that have really been down to the bottom of the drug using scale like I have myself, because we don't get those opportunities. Security see our applications, they sign them off. It's computer says no, it's an instant no stamp. And there is something about the prison service becoming more risk averse. We've done this in our community settings. We've took chances on people that probably the rest of the system wouldn't take a chance on. And they have been that person that's transmitted that message to the person that's still suffering as well. And much of what I see on Genpot Wings was visible contagious addiction. It was there, it was catching, and people were catching it. And we know that because people are coming into prison now without a drug problem and they are getting drug problems while they're in prison. Next slide, please, Kate. And the joy of 15 steps onto the ISFL. So first of all, for me, ISFL, let's break it down. Incentivize. Okay, what are those incentives and are they working? And do those same incentives work in a local estate, a resettlement estate, a high security state? And the answer, of course, to that is no. No, there isn't a blanket incentives. Incentivize need to be tailored to your population, your group, your area, whoever your men are on the ring. I have walked onto ISFLs that instantly look, sound and feel different, and sometimes it has been instant. And I've walked around with people with me now. I don't know if Sarah is Sarah on the meeting, Katie?
She's in Risley today.
Ah, right, yeah. For an example, we did a prison last week and Sarah walked on and she even instantly. So I have seen this positive 15 step on ISFLs. Signage and motivational and inspirational murals, wall art, notice boards that are specific for community activities, soft furnishings, they all make a difference and they are all appreciated by the prisoners. Every prisoner I spoke to appreciated being in a space that reminded them constantly of inspirational quotes and murals, and it really made a massive difference. In staffing wise, some of the best and highest functioning ISFLs I've seen have had sent out expression of interest for ISFL staff. So specific staff that are really sort of engaged, really curious and really wanting to make a difference are recruited into that space. It's made a massive difference. Some of the top 4 ISFLs that I've seen have all recruited staff via an expression of interest and all the staff want to be on there. And to add to that, all the staff that I spoke to on ISFLs that are high functioning have reduced sickness as well. And most of them go away with a sense of having made a difference today. And there aren't many other wings in the prison estate where staff get the opportunity to be able to say that. I think the end goal, the ultimate goal, if we're going to reduce demand for drugs, we know we can't search our way out of it. We know we can't scan our way out of it. We know we can't detect our way out of it. You can find as many drones as you want. That's all great. The only way to reduce demand for drugs is to build recovery. And we need to build recovery on ISFLs. And it's possible because I've seen it. We have to create a space where the prisoners on that ISFL, much of what Mark was talking about, but they don't police the environment, but it's not okay to use drugs on here. And they do it from a very unjudgmental place. If you want to use drugs, that's absolutely fine. Piss off back to A-Wing and use drugs, because on here, we don't use drugs. And the journey of an ISFL to a therapeutic ISFL is creating that space. And there are ingredients that's going to be needed in ISFL for that space to happen. Can it happen? Absolutely. I have seen 100% drug-free ISFLs, 100% tradable med-free ISFLs. going back to the chime stuff that that's alluded to in the framework, and Mark's spoken about and Katie's spoken about as well, how does that really play itself out in daily, you know, in the life of someone like me, an ex-prisoner? What does that look like? If we speak about connectedness, now connectedness is the foundation of recovery. I have not met anyone who's walked in my shoes that could do recovery on their own. I've not met them. I tried to do it on my own for about 25 years and I failed miserably and repeatedly every time. So when we speak about connectedness, we talk about solid ground, building a foundation of support that can hold me when I fall, that can capture me and use a safety net when I fall. Because if I have nothing underneath me when I fall badly. And I've been falling badly most of my life. So if we speak about hope as well, and hope, this is that visible, contagious recovery. Hope is all about seeing is believing. If you bring in a lived experience into the wing and he does a lived experience talk and I can identify with some of his story, hope is instant in that space. If I've got peer mentors, recovery mentors on this wing that have come off of methadone, that are not using crack anymore, or that don't use spice anymore, and they've been given, and they look and they sound well, that is instant hope. What transmits to me there is instant hope. If I can't see hope, it's hard for me to behave in a hopeful way. Identity, I know, is probably the biggest key part, and staff have a role to play in this as well, because ISFLs use a pro-social modelling model. So I model the people that are around me, or I don't come to the ISFL, I get evicted off, I have to leave the ISFL. So prisoners have a responsibility of that, to carry themselves in the right way and to be good role models, but staff do too as well, because pro-social modelling works across both. So prisoners will model themselves on how staff respond, behave, react, or how they don't respond, behave, react. So that is trauma-informed care at its truest, when staff and prisoners are pro-social modelling together to carry and transmit hope. Meaning is quite a simple one. A reason to get out of bed in the morning. A timetable for someone that's in the chaos that says Monday this, Tuesday that, Wednesday that, Thursday that, Friday that. I can look at that timetable and hope and hang on until Tuesday when I can do that, or hang on till the next day when I can connect to that, and hang on. The purpose of meaning that can come from a simple timetable that's telling me what I'm doing tomorrow, to give me a reason to get out of bed in the morning. And probably empowerment is the easiest one. Do it with me. Build confidence. Let me take some ownership what I do. Map my progress, celebrate my progress, however small. I've just given a clean UTI on the ISFL. That is party time on the ISFL. That is everyone high-fiving each other on the ISFL for a collective well done. Because every negative UTI or every negative test is a collective. It's not an individual. The wings celebrate it. The guys celebrate it. The ladies celebrate it. And the staff celebrate it. And we turn individual tests into a celebration together, where staff celebrate. We're on. Next slide, please, Katie. Something else that's in the framework I'm going to talk about in the next slide as well is that if we're moving to a place that has chime, that has connectedness, that hope, it's going to help me get identity. There's something really simple. It's simple to us out here. We've been doing it for a long time, but it's something that the machine that is the prison service, there's some transformation that needs to happen. And a really clear example of that is called asset-based community development. And the short version of that is there are experts and people and carers and people that are responsible for my well-being. They do it to me. Now, my experience of being done to has been by a judge. They do it to me. Police tend to do it to me. Surgeons might have done it to you once. Dentists kind of do it to you. You don't really got a lot of say in it. Yeah, you take what's coming. Yeah, you take it on the chin. You don't have much say, and you hope it's going to be all right. So that's a done to process. And there's a lot of that going on in prisons now. Everything is done to. Decisions are made about me without me. And then there's the done for model. And we see drug workers and support workers and different elements of service kind of doing for me what I should be doing for myself. So instead of empowering me to do it and taking time and sitting with me and doing it with me, they tend to do it for me. And they might fill out my forms, and they might do all this stuff. They might make phone calls for me. So it's quite disempowering. And this is it's called done for. We moved to a model in all of our community settings, drug and alcohol settings as well, to create this recovery orientated system of care where we do it with. The whole thing is about doing it with. And we have this theory where it says no decision about me without me. Now, the prison is way behind in terms of social care settings and some of the settings where we work in community settings in doing with. Now, of course, there are a lot of complexities in this, and you know, there's security information that can't be done with. But I would be asking every drug strategy lead in this meeting today, how much of it can we do with? How much of it can I do it with you? And it can be the simple thing about giving me a choice. Would you prefer a female worker or a male worker? Would you prefer to do this in a quieter space? Would you prefer, does this work for you? Is this okay for you? And when we create a space where we're doing with, that's that therapeutic spot where we reduce demand for drugs. And of course, the end game, if we create that space doing it with, we end up with an ISFL, and I've seen it, and it's evident in our residential settings where people are doing it for each other, by each other. And that is the sweet spot. Addiction doesn't do 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. Most of the wonderful staff on this meeting, and most of the wonderful DART staff and SMS staff, they do. There has to be that therapeutic safe space that exists outside of when you go home. That is the creation of that. Next slide, please, Kate. Going to whiz through these now because I know I've been talking for a long time. So you may be aware of the framework, and I'm very proud to say that the Basement Recovery Project co-designed this framework with all the big players. We were in there with all the big guns as well, and we had a voice, and our voice said, please do this. Next slide, please, Katie. We said, please do this. Please put enabling recovery first. Please put that at the top of the pile. Please drive that as priority number 1. And then priority 2 can be reducing demand, and priority 3 can be restricting supply. Because if you enable recovery, you reduce demand. If you reduce demand, you restrict supply. So we almost turn the old framework on its head, flip it right round the other way. Let's not put recovery at the back door, something that happens later down the line. Let's put recovery at the front door. And there's 3 parts of this: section 2, section 4, and section 5. Create a recovery culture. Now that's a job. That ain't an overnight thing. You can't write a little, I don't know, a drug strategy for the next 12 months. Creating a culture starts with all the small things. And I just know Tracy's going to talk about that, because Tracy has a culture that's been created on the ISFLs at Deerbolt that's took a long time to nurture, but it's very much there. But it starts with the little things. Let's create a new culture. The other one as well is promoting desistance by taking a rehabilitative response to substance misuse, because it's still very punitive. And I do know that there are some people that use drugs that absolutely there is a punitive response and there needs to be adjudications, and I get it. But if we can move to a space where every time a rehabilitative response is considered and factored in and offered, then we have a whole prison approach to drug use. Every adjudication it is offered, most of them will be declined, and most of them are currently. But if we create a space where that's normal, where it's normal to be offered rehabilitation as opposed to adjudication. And probably the other big one for me is promoting recovery by developing recovery capital. How do we build recovery capital on an ISFL wing that's contagious to the rest of the prison? I know Tracy's going to talk about that as well, but that relates back to the CHIME model. If we have a CHIME model and we're doing with prisoners instead of to them, then we create recovery capital in that. Next slide, please, Katie. You lot have Magic Mike. We have Magic Mark, and he's on this meeting today, and he's blowing enough smoke up my arse at the moment, so I'm just going to blow a little bit of smoke up Mark's backside as well. Mark, yeah, to have someone like you on board following us around, and you know, your wisdom and your intelligence, it's been probably the highest part of this for me. And Mark's writing a paper to give this stuff an evidence base, and he sent me a little thing the other day, a little taste test of what it is. It brings tears to my eyes reading it, Mark, because we know this works. We've been doing it in community settings for 20 years. We know this works. We know how transformational this can be in people's lives. And to have someone like you believe in it as well, Mark's been a game changer for me. So we're off on round 2 of the SL. We've done some learning. Mark's tweaked it a bit. We've got some feedback from Mark. What we're going to do different this time, we're going to have more time with the SLT this time. We're going to let them ask questions and really give them a space where they can say, all right, that's brilliant. How do we do it? And we're going to hope to answer some of those questions. We've also extended it to some CMs and some of the wider management, lower management team. That's the right word, politically correct, lower management, but you know, guys, you know what I mean. So we have a more captive audience, because what I do feel, and what everybody else on the pilot felt, was that this needs to be pitched at the people on ground floor, the people that can actually implement some of it. I've done some really targeted questions for staff this time, so I'm going to ask all staff the same questions so we can evaluate it more fairly. I did a workshop with the prisoners as well, so we're going to do a recovery workshop. And the idea of that is we're taking the recovery temperature for the rest of the prison. So, for example, we did our first one last week, and we specifically asked for 3 or 4 men that are doing really well, ISFL, drug-free, really well, and we want 12 to 15 men that are really struggling, 12 to 15 men that are prolific UTIs throughout the estate. That was very kindly supplied to us. I did a workshop with them. From that workshop, I was able to ascertain, is there a culture of recovery in here? Do the men want it if they've offered it? Is it something that the men are aspiring to? Is it available? And from that workshop, we're taking their recovery temperature in terms of, is there any hope in this prison that's being transmitted to the men that they can get clean while they're in there? And again, at the end one, probably my most favourite, is that I've been allowed to shorten this report and make it a lot smaller and make it much more feedbacky as opposed to reporty, because I ain't no report writer. Next slide, please, Katie. I think it's our last one. There is hope here. This is the basements. This is our kind of motto in our centres, in all our buildings. This is us. It's on our logo. It's everywhere. There is hope here. What I want to say to everybody on this meeting today, and I know many of you as well, and I've had the pleasure of meeting you and coming on your ISFLs, there is most definitely hope. Even if it doesn't feel like it today, there is most definitely hope, because that hope is felt by the prisoners. And as soon as you feel them, you guys will as well. Next slide, please, Kate. Yeah, this one's about you, Katie, I'm afraid. It's coming your way. As you know, I don't know if it's public yet, so I don't know if I'm allowed to, but yeah, I just wanted to take this opportunity, Katie, because your vision, your courage, yeah, go against the grain a little bit to champion some of this stuff, to bring in lived experience and give it a microphone like you give it. You have give it a loudspeaker system, and that loudspeaker has hit the ears of so many people. I don't know if you know already how many lives you probably changed in that, Kate, and I'm sure you wouldn't be able to comprehend it, but I'm telling you, from a person that's seen it with his own eyes, you have. I know you will continue to do that as well, but it's just an opportunity for me very publicly, yeah, to say wherever you're going next, they're so lucky to have you. And they, number one, yeah, keep doing what you're doing, because listen, you are a force of nature, and it's been a pleasure working with you, Katie. Thanks for listening, everyone.
Larry, I wasn't expecting you to say that. Are you trying to make me cry on a recording now? Thank you so much. And for those of you who don't know, because I actually haven't told many people yet, but I am moving on to a new role, and I'm super excited that I'm going to be the Deputy Governor of HMP Wood Hill. So yeah, very, very soon. So very excited for that. But thank you, Larry. That means the absolute world. So yeah, appreciate it, and all the love that everyone's given me. Thank you so much. Larry, you're amazing. As always, you are just, like some people have said in the chat, you capture everyone. Claire's just said, Larry, your enthusiasm is infectious. I could listen to you all day. Thank you. Really insightful. And you've had lots of reactions and hearts and claps and everything. So you definitely do have a way of being able to translate this into, yeah, us. We know we're doing the right thing. We're on the right path, and that you ground us in that. So thank you. Next, I'm going to hand over to our wonderful Tracy, who is the drug strat lead at Deerbolt. And I've had the pleasure of knowing Tracy, I feel like, for a couple of years now, and it's been wonderful. So I'm going to hand over to Tracy to talk about Deerbolt.
Okay, lovely. Thank you very much, Katie. And everybody else has praised Larry and given some description of him. So I'm just going to call you a legend, Larry, okay, from the work that I've done with you. So thank you very much. So it falls to me at the end, almost at the end of our presentation, before our Q&A session, to actually give you a bit of an insight into an ISFL. Okay, so next slide, please, Katie. So what does an ISFL mean to the people that actually live on an ISFL? And prior to me being in Deerbolt, I was in Durham as the drug strat lead and helped set up an ISFL there. This is some of the feedback from the prisoners that live on an ISFL. And what really comes home to me straight away with the Chime model is it's from them themselves. It's a place of hope. That's what they're finding on an ISFL. It's lovely, as one of them said, that is getting to know himself all over again. He knew who he was inside, but having that dependency on illicit substances took the real him away. So now he's finding himself, he's on a brand new journey and he's really enjoying it. Again, we can't thank the staff enough. He would be dead now without the ISFL. And again, we'll go into that a little bit further into the presentation, but it really is, for me, it's about partnership all the time. It's a partnership with the prisoners. It's a partnership with the staff. It's a partnership that we work with our other partners that come on board to help support the men in their journey of recovery. One that struck me as well is one of the prisoners here. Since he's been with us, he's lost his mum and now one of his sisters as well. And for him to turn and say, "Wish me mum had lived to see me turn my life around," that is so powerful for somebody to be able to reflect on that, see who they are, and then have no regrets. But it's just a wish that he was hoping for. Next slide, please. So I'm going to look at the key ingredients that make up an ISFL. So as each ingredient, the slide will then follow with me breaking it down further. So to the new first slide, please, Katie. So that is about the community ethos of an ISFL, and it has to become a peer-led community. As we've already been spoken about, is I haven't walked in any of the prisoners' shoes. I can bring a project together. I can bring partners together, but I need and respect and value. There is something that a peer-led community brings together, which I can't be one of those. What I can do is work across prison with the SLT and all our partners and look at the ethos of a community. So when we set up the first ISFL in Deerbolt, because we now have two, and it's proving so popular, our waiting list is very healthy. So we're now going to be looking at setting up our third ISFL, and each ISFL has places for 60 men. So we start from the very beginning, and it's about the compacts. It's about behaviour. It's a lot of the men that I have come across have never had structure in their life, going back to being a child. They don't know what structure is. They don't know what boundaries are. There wasn't a framework when they were children. So they've grown up in a chaotic environment. By giving them a set of behaviours, it reduces their stress because they know what they're working towards. So the compacts on an ISFL will always include the type of behaviour we would expect. Everybody on an ISFL, they have to go to work, or they have to go into education, or they have to have a purposeful activity. We don't do duvet days on an ISFL, because if you're laying in your pit, right, you're disconnected from your community. So everybody needs to get up, have a purpose, and get on with the day. Little things like, some people on here may not understand what sliders are, but they're like a flip-flop, and it's a big thing in a prison that the lads are only normally allowed to wear sliders when they go for a shower. But when they've been out at work all day, I guess what most of us do when we get home, we kick off our boots, our shoes, and we put our slippers and flip-flops on. But why should it not be any different for the men that have been out on waste management and they've had big heavy boots on all day? And like Larry said, it's the little things. Okay, so it was a little thing. It didn't cost any money. It didn't create any violence. It created an incentive. It created something different for being on an ISFL as to being in the main population. We have a fitness suite, so they sign a compact for that, so that they know how to treat the equipment and look after it. We invest a lot of money, but you create a nice environment, and it has a ripple effect on the men. They want to be able to use the DVD players. They want to be able to go into a nice fitness suite. They want to be able to go and cook together and have nice items to use. So again, peer-led groups and activities, absolutely fundamental, because we're empowering the men to actually take charge of the community that they are living in. We have Way Through is our substance misuse group. So they have got peer mentors. We have healthcare peer mentors. We've got mental health peer mentors. We have our Red Band, which is great. He's not a catalogue man, I have to say. He's been on a journey of recovery himself. We're extremely lucky to be a pilot site now for recovery transmitters. And that first training day took place yesterday, and the recovery transmitters were just buzzing, as were the staff members that were able to be in there with Larry as well. We're really looking forward for more lived experience to come in and actually train 20 prisoners to become recovery allies, as well as staff members, so that we can stop some of the stigma across the whole prison. So it's not just on the ISFL. We'll have 2 recovery allies on the other wings as well in main population. So it's about that social contagion and starting with the small things and then building up with that. Next one, please, Katie. Okay, the next ingredient you need for a successful ISFL is staff selection and the stability that that brings. And as Larry alluded to earlier, Deerbolt were very lucky and in a position to be able to ask staff to do their expressions of interest and the reasons why they wanted to come and work on an ISFL. It makes an enormous difference on an ISFL when you have the same group of officers detailed. It enables them to build relationships with the men on the wing. It also enables the prisoners to develop trust, because what they've not got is an officer that's on the wing for that day, and they go and ask the officer for something and he or she turns around and says, yeah, that's not a problem, yeah, I'll get that sorted for you. No, you're not, because you're on nights the next day and then you're on 7 days rest. Okay, so you're not going to be there. So it just builds up and builds up, whereas it's the same group of officers. All of the officers work in tandem with one another. All of the officers on an ISFL become the key workers for the men that are on the ISFL. It develops that relationship and it enables the connection between the staff and the prisoners. One thing I will say about the expressions of interest, what we're doing in Deerbolt now is some prison officers don't know what an ISFL is. So rather than exclude them and then the myth starts about what an ISFL is, we're now actively encouraging them to come onto an ISFL and do a shift with us. And then what they're observing and what they're learning, and they see how dealing with people differently enables a better relationship. They're now going to take that back into main population as well. So that's in its infancy at the moment, but I'm really excited to see how that develops as well. Next slide, please. So an ISFL, you want it to be different. You want it, we have some very, very complex prisoners on our ISFL, and we want a calmness about it. We don't want officers shouting commands and instructions. What's wrong with just going up and actually speaking to somebody as well? So it's a lot quieter on the ISFL. We want to help a lot of our men build relationships back with their families and significant others. Okay, so what we then do is we incorporate activities where their loved ones can be included in. So it's things like a children's book club. Now, who would have thought of that on an ISFL? But what we do, the men come in, they look at a book that their child or their daughter or their sister might enjoy, and they choose a book and we send it out to that individual that they've opted for to receive that book. It's an opening part for the next phone call. Did your book get there? What did you think of it? They can have the same book, so they can talk about a chapter that they've both read. So it's about helping support rebuilding some of the relationships that have been broken through their dependency on illicit substances. You would never think that a lot of male prisoners would enjoy embroidery. You wouldn't think that they would enjoy pottery. But what we found is if their hands are busy, their minds are quiet. So again, it's about giving them some motivational posters, giving them some artwork to do, get some plants in there, get some nice classical music playing in the background. One of the other things we have is a DVD, which is a fish tank on a DVD. And then when they come to the servery for the food, it just calms people down just watching the fish whilst they're waiting to go and get their evening meals. Next slide, please. Okay, mixed recovery cohorts. In my experience, and I know some prisoners do it differently, but I personally believe in a hybrid model for an ISFL, because for me, when a prisoner is released into his community, he's not going to live on a row of houses where everybody's had a dependency on illicit substances. He's going to go and live next door to people who might not totally understand his behaviour and things like that. So on the ISFL, any man in the prison can apply to come onto the ISFL, but we always keep the tipping point is for those men that are in recovery. So your community, you have to be realistic, okay, and you have to accept, even as 60 men, 120 men on our ISFL, they can all be at different stages of recovery. So you have to be person-centred. Not one thing fits all. And even if it's an ISFL, don't ever lose sight of the individuals that make up your ISFL community. And again, your recovery capital. So you've got your personal, your social, and your community. You have to work hard. It's about investment every day. Every time that you come into work, you are investing in the people in your care. Next slide, please, Katie. So incentives and recognition, lived experience, priceless. It is a priceless enrichment that you bring into a prison with your lived experience. One of the things we do is a monthly walk and talk. That's an incentive. Now, we did it a year ago. We've just celebrated in September our first year's anniversary. We did it as part of the recovery month. The men absolutely loved it and said, could we do it every week, Tracy? I said, no, we haven't got the resources, but we can do it the last Friday of every month. That's it. They're sold on that. They have their fitness suites. What we do after a walk and talk, we come back, we have a cake, a cupcake, a piece of Victoria sandwich cake, have a cup of tea, and we sit and play bingo. You can hear a pin drop when you're playing bingo. They love cooking together. Last night as I left A Wing, which is one of the ISFLs, there was a beautiful smell in the association room. So I followed the smell into the cooking area, and I've got 6 men there. They've got tortilla wraps, they've got tuna, they've got chili flakes. They're all working together, just talking and laughing. One's doing the letter. And I said, smells gorgeous. What is it? They said, oh, would you like to try one, Trace? I said, if you've got enough. And I sat down with them and I enjoyed a tuna wrap with them. And what they do is they all club together. So every weekend, each night, one of the 6 then has to cook the meal for the other 6. Priceless. Brilliant. Next slide, please. What we also do is the recognition of achievement. So it can be a lot of verbal praise, like when they come back from work, I might just say to them, Billy, you had a good shift today. Yeah, I've had a great shift, Trace. Well done, enjoy your lunch. It might be another one, the walk and talk certificate. They love the certificates because something that they can put on the wall in their pads. It's something we can talk to their loved ones about as well. Next certificate, next slide, please, Katie. I am conscious of the time. Okay, so then we talk about the integration with the wider pathways. So we've talked about the LEROs, the employment opportunities and continuity of care. The best way to help run an ISFL and to sustain an ISFL is to embrace the LEROs. LEROs in the community, I say they are priceless. So you work with your LERO organisations, find out who they are, where they are, go out and meet them, and then invite them to come in to speak with the men and the staff. And then what we find is some of our LEROs, when the men are on release, they can go and volunteer with the LERO organisations. And sometimes, not every time, but then that might give them an opportunity for employment. When we've gone to a Cat D, we've had men from our Cat Ds actually go and volunteer with LEROs who have now actually employed them. priceless. Again, the employment opportunities, work with your employment skills and work managers in the prison and look at what type of employment on release will be the right sort of employment for the men that are leaving an ISFL. And continuity of care, mirror what's in the community. All right, in the prison, we've still got a lot to learn because we sometimes start the work 12 weeks prior to release. Well, if we've already had somebody for 4 years, why haven't we front loaded it rather than we put it at the end? Okay, so there's still some work there to be doing with our partners, and never forgetting, if we get it right with our continuity of care, when the men are released, it could reduce their reoffending and help protect the public, which is what our job is in the prison. Next slide, please. So security and risk management. Make sure that as a drug strategy lead, you work close with your security and your safer custody. The three are integrated. Look at your terms of reference for your meetings. You've got to have the right people round your table. If you haven't got the right terms of reference, go away and write them. Go and speak with people and ask for theirs as well. So really important. You've got to develop close working relationships. Share, share, share. That's what I would say with security and safer custody. Next slide, please, Katie. So the data. So iWing was our first ISFL in Deerbolt, and we opened it the 1st of August 2024. Prior to that, it had 47 incidents of self-harm. However, then when it turned into an ISFL, it dropped to 15 for that same period of time. A-Wing, which we didn't open as an ISFL until January this year. Prior to that, 32 incidents of self-harm, dropped to 13. Okay, so we're not saying it's perfect and it stops the self-harm, but there is a significant reduction in self-harm on an ISFL. We have also seen a reduction in prisoner on staff assaults and prisoner on prisoner assaults. Staff sickness for us, for the staff on the ISFL, they are 50% less likely to go off sick than somebody that is working in the main population. And because they're not going off sick, that gives us the stability of the same team of staff on an ISFL. Okay, and finally, okay, what I want to say to people is, the prison service is moving in a different direction. The boat has started to turn. Be brave. That's one thing I would say. Be brave and dare to be different, because what we've done for the previous 10 years hasn't worked. So dare to be different. Believe in people. Use the guidance from the operational drugs and alcohol framework. Brilliant. Those first 6 objectives are all about enabling recovery. Make it happen. And we have a mantra on our ISFLs, because no 2 days are the same. It's not perfect. The journey of recovery is difficult. You're going to have some good days, you're going to have some not good days. But what you've got to remember is, at the end of the day, we always say, and tomorrow we go again, because that's what the journey of recovery is. Thank you.
Wow. There we go. We're at time now, so we're all super passionate, and we've got to the point where we've maxed out our hour and a half. We thought we were going to have 20 minutes for Q&A, so that obviously goes to show we get a bit ahead of ourselves. But I think that it's really important, and I feel like actually there hasn't been questions and stuff coming through, so I feel like actually we've hopefully we've done an all right job of being able to explain and give some insight into really how special these spaces are and can be, and the potential that they've got. So you've heard from the national team, you've heard from lived experience, you've heard from an academic, you've heard from a drug strat lead who's doing this. So hopefully you guys have come off of this call and really do believe that recovery is possible in prisons. We're really grateful for everyone who took the time today to be here, and we know that prisons are really busy, and we're really grateful that you have taken the time, and there are people that want to watch the recording back, so there will be more people that this impacts. So thank you for all of your time, and thank you to Larry, thank you to Mark, thank you to Tracy, and thanks to all of you who came here today. And I'm going to